Hello, in this overview I'm going to show you a new feature which we've just released, which is the ability for you to use the Oodlü API yourself. This is going to be useful if you're doing coding projects and stuff like that, and at the moment this is a very early stage development, and so we're going to be adding to the API as time goes on. So you'll see there's not much in there yet, but keep an eye out on this because it will grow. This is an Oodlü premium feature, so this is the $1 a month, £1 a month subscription for unlimited access, and this gives both the teacher who has got that subscription and any students who are underneath that teacher in groups, they also will have permission to use the API as well. And so I'm just going to talk you through how it works now and how you can kind of get started with coding some stuff up. So I've just logged into my my dashboard here. If I go to the More menu at the top right, I can then click on API. And that takes me to the API documentation page. If you, when you first visit this, it will generate your API credentials for you, and they'll be displayed at the top of the page here. If you're not a subscriber yet, that'll just tell you to subscribe in that point there. And basically the API credentials consist of two parts. There's the entity ID and the access key, and those two parts need to be sent with every request that is made to the API. To authenticate your session and allow the data to be released to you. So because they need to be sent to the server every time, all API requests are going to be post requests because we have to post those to the server. That's just an easier way for us to manage that security element. So you'll have unique ones of these for yourself. You can just click on those and copy them to the clipboard if you wish to. That copies them to the clipboard so you can use them. But you probably won't need to actually, because we've kind of made, hopefully the documentation should be relatively straightforward to use, and the correct entity ID and access key for your usage will be displayed anytime there are code samples and request samples in the documentation that you're looking at below. So I'm just going to talk you through it. At the moment we've only got these two types of requests. We've got check credentials, which is just used for checking that your credentials actually work and making sure that you're comfortable before you start doing anything more complex. As this grows, there may be more complex things that you can do. And then there's the get questions one, which will just get a list of the questions in a particular question collection. And this is a slightly more complicated one because the returned response is a bit more woohoo. So let's just have a look at the check credentials item to get used to the idea of how this works first. So in check credentials, you'll see that each of these documented items will have the same kind of structure. So you've got a description of what the endpoint does, the endpoint itself, the actual location of that. Again, you can copy that to clipboard if you wish to. The method is always going to be post, but I put it there just to make sure that it's clear. And the content type is going to be application JSON. All the stuff that comes to and from our API is in the format of JSON. So then below that we've got three tabs, each of which is going to be useful to you. The first is the request. This is the body of the request that needs to be posted. In this instance we're just checking credentials, so it is literally just the credentials themselves. And then you're going to have the response that comes back from the server is going to be this here, which in this case is just a status of 1 and a message saying your credentials work. And then we've provided some sample Python code on the basis that probably most people doing these things will be using Python. We may add some other language samples in time, but for now we're just doing it in Python. And so you can copy and paste that into your code editor, and it should work. So I thought I'd just actually run you through a real life example here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a copy of Visual Studio Code. You can use any editor you like. I'm just using VS Code because that's my preference. But you can do it in Notepad if you wanted to. Anyway, and you may notice as well I'm on a Linux Ubuntu machine here, but that really doesn't matter what machine you're on. You can use anything you want. So I'm going to create myself a new file here. Actually, I might just zoom in on this a bit as well. We're quite zoomed out, aren't we? Let's just make this all a bit bigger so you can see a bit more about what's going on. I'm going to create a new file here, and I'm going to call this test.py. Might even go a bit further in again, just to make it ready, because we've not got that. We don't need that much space for this. Okay, so here we are. We've got a file called test.py. I've sparked up a terminal down here as well, so that I can actually run some terminal commands as well. And I'm just going to go back to the the check credentials endpoint here, and I'm going to go to my sample Python code, and I'm just going to grab all that code. I'm going to copy and paste it into the editor there, into my new Python file, and I can click on save. Now if I want to run this, I can just type in Python, or if you maybe to Python 3, you might use Python 3 beforehand, and then test.py, and I can run that. And that will then run it, and what it's done is it's gone off to the server and it's made the request and it's returned. It's saying your credentials work, status 1. Status 0, by the way, would be a fail. That would be something wrong. Hopefully you won't get that. If your credentials don't work, you're just going to get what we call a 401 error, which is an access denied error. But hopefully you will get, this will work because it's been formatted in such a way you can just copy and paste it in. But we don't give you a soft message in that case. It's just a 401 fail, access denied error status. So okay, so let's now have a look at the body of actually what we've got in this code here, just to talk you through. It's probably quite familiar to you already if you've done this sort of thing before, but just for the sake of clarity, let's do that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import the requests library. This is just a really great library for pulling requests down and getting data from them, from APIs and anything else really, actually. And then the next part here is our post data. So this is the data which we had in our API documentation under request. It's this stuff here. So in the request thing, because we're making a request to the server and we're going to send this JSON data to the server. And so I'm just sticking it into a variable so that it's a little bit neater here, but you can do it any way you like, but I prefer to do it like that. And then so that post data is going to be used just down here when we actually post to the in the request. So then I'm creating a variable which I'm just calling R. You could call it whatever you want, Donkey Kong if you want. I've called it R, and that's going to be equal to whatever is returned by the request library making a post to our endpoint, and this is the endpoint which is displayed here in the documentation. And we're going to send it data in the form of JSON. And the data is this post data which I've just been talking about here. And then afterwards we're just going to print whatever is returned in the request object .text, which is the property of the returned, the text property of the return value. And when we do that, the text property of the return value is this: message, your credentials work, status 1. And that is what you see in our response here. So that is your credentials work, status 1. So that's what it's doing. So that's the actual basic request part of it. I'm just going to show you briefly, in case you're not familiar with it, how to actually extract specific properties from the response, so that you're familiar with that as well. I didn't put this into the sample code because it seemed like I always like to give like a very basic boilerplate to start off, and then you can expand from there so it's easy to understand. To do that, I'm going to import the JSON library. This is a parsing library for parsing text into JSON and JSON into text. And here we can do what we need to do, because this text that comes back is literally just text. I mean, it's not got any formatting. It's formatted, but it's not kind of saved in a dictionary or object or a list or anything like that. It's just text. And so, oh, excuse me, sorry. I'm going to create a new variable. I'm just going to call it D. Call it anything you want again. And I'm going to use the JSON library, and I'm going to do loads, because I'm going to load this data, and I'm going to load the r.text. So this is the text which we just printed down here. I'm now going to load it into a JSON object. So basically D is going to be equal to whatever's returned by the JSON library when it loads this data into JSON. And so we can now print, if we print D, we're going to get very similar thing, but you may notice there's some sort of Unicode precursors and stuff like that in there. But what we actually want to do is just get one of the properties, and so you can use this. You can reference properties in there. One of the properties in there is message, by just using this syntax here, like a square bracket and then a quotation. And when you do that, you're going to get your credentials work, which is the returned message there. If I wanted to get the status, I could just change that to status, and I'm going to get 1, which is our status. So you can use that particular kind of technique for drilling down into more complicated response responses from the server by just kind of drilling down using this kind of syntax to get there. So that's that. Let's now have a quick look at the other one. We've got the get questions, and this is maybe a bit more exciting because it actually does something that you can use. And in this instance, again, we've got the request. And notice here now we've got also a payload. So payload will be... sorry, let's just go through the beginning. So this gets a list of the questions for a particular question collection. So you need to know the ID of the question collection, and I'll show you how to get that in a second. We're going to code in a slightly neater way of doing that, but for now you'll have to do it kind of the chunky way. So in here it's going to get the questions for a particular question collection. Here's the endpoint. It's a post again. It's JSON application JSON as the content type. And then the request has got a payload in it, and so this payload is, we've got the credentials part of this request, and we've got the payload part, because the payload is going to be used for anywhere where we want to actually send something else to the server. So if in this instance we need to pass the question collection ID to the server so it knows which one to grab, and it may be that in other requests we'll have other payload things that are in there. For example, it might be if you're going to get a list of students, you might want to pass in the student IDs or something like that, or whatever. So anyway, here we go. So here we got payload and it's question collection ID, and this is the question collection ID for one that I just kind of know. It's got 3 simple questions in it, and then in the response, it's going to respond with what looks like a horrendously complicated response here, and that's because actually the question structure on Oodlü is quite complex. But this is a simplified version because it really is quite complex, as you might imagine, for what we do with the various different types of question. But the anatomy of this basically is that you've got a questions object, and that is a list. You'll notice this square bracket indicates it's a list. And so it's a list of these items. There's one of them there, and there's the next one, and there's the next one. And in those you've got each of those is one question. So there are 3 questions in this question collection. This is a list of those 3 questions. And in here we've got certain things that are going to be standard, like there's always a question part to this, unless someone hasn't entered one. Question ID is, we don't really need to give you that, but we thought it might be helpful for you to have that so that you can use it if you want to do stuff based on specific questions. So you've got an ID for it there. And then this is an interesting one here. This is the question type. These 3 properties here will always be there. You're going to have the question ID, and the question type. And that's because we support lots of different question types. And each of the different question types has different data attached to it. And we will actually, we may document some of these structures a little bit because you'll have to figure them out yourself at the moment. They're fairly self-explanatory, but so this is a question type 3, which is a textual multiple choice. Different questions will have different IDs and different descriptions, but it'll tell you what they are. And then for each of the question types, you're going to get question data. So that's what this is here. And this won't be the same for every question type. It will be different. So this is question data MCQ. MCQ stands for multiple choice questions. And so in here we've got the relevant data for a question of type textual multiple choice. So here we go. If we look at this, we've got an answer, that's correct. We've got an answer incorrect 1, incorrect 2, and incorrect 3. So those are the incorrect answers. So you can pull from that the answers and the incorrect answers, and you can pull the question. So if we'll have a play with this in a second. I might screw things up a bit because it's quite, as you can see, it's quite complicated. But I'll do my best to kind of give you a quick overview of how this works, having never tried coding this particular structure before. And then it gives you some sample Python code which will allow you to actually access this stuff in the same way as you could for the credentials check. You can also do this. You can just copy this. So let's do that. Let's just grab this code now, and we're going to go into our Python editor again, and I'm going to just copy and paste. And with a bit of luck, haven't tested this yet. I just released the API and didn't test it, but let's have a look. There we go. There is our question data that's come back from the server happily, and as you can see, it looks pretty scary to start with, but that's why we have given you this response in a nice readable form here, because you're going to need to be able to look at this to understand what's going on. So let's break this down again and do some slightly deeper stuff onto this. So let's import JSON again here, and let's create. Doing this is just the same as I did before. JSON loads, and we're going to load r.text. So now we've got our all this question data here is now loaded into proper JSON format. So now we can start querying it. So let's do a list. Let's do a loop for, let's say, for q in d questions. Okay, so that's going to be going to the object d, which is the JSON. This whole thing is going to look for the node called questions, right? And oh, excuse me. And what we're going to do is we're just going to print q, right? So this is going to print each of the question nodes one by one. So if we run this now, we're going to get, it doesn't look very different, but you'll notice now that it's split 1, 2, 3 questions. Yeah, if I wanted to make this a bit more obvious, I could do some kind of divider so you can see it when I do this. There it is, it's divided them up with a divider. Okay. So that's cool. Now, if we want to actually get the question from that, we're within the question now. Let's get the question text. We'll call it q text equals, and we're going to look at that q object. So that's one of these. Okay. So in this instance, it's one of these. Okay. And so we're in the questions. We're looping through the questions, and we've got one of the questions, and we've put that into a variable called q. And so we can access the question from within that variable q in the same way as we did just get the questions element as well. So we're going to go q text equals q and then question. And now if we print q text, it's going to give us our questions only. So now we've got where is Paris, where is Berlin, and where is New York. That's just given us our questions. So that's cool. Now we've got our questions. Let's maybe now have a look through the answers. Okay, so we're going to need to know what type of question this is to be able to respond properly to this now. I'm going to zoom out a bit. We're going to run out of room a bit. Actually, no, I could just fold some stuff up, couldn't I? No, maybe that's just difficult to understand. Okay, so I'm going to now look. I want to see what question type this is, because depending on what question type it is going to depend on what we have to read in terms of the question data in this instance for its answers and incorrect answers. So I'm going to go and have a look at question type, and I'm going to find out if it's ID of 3, because I know that is a textual multiple choice. So let's do that now. So we are in the question. So we're going to say q type ID. I'm just going to go straight in and grab the ID from this to save us our eyes bleeding. So I'm going to go to that question. I'm going to grab the question type. Last time we grabbed the question, now we're going to grab the question type element, and then inside that we're going to grab the ID element. Okay, so this is going deeper in. So basically we're in the question now. We're going into the question type element, and then we're going to grab the value of the ID. So if I just print that, I'm going to get 3 for each of these. And the reason I'm getting 3 is because each of these has a question type ID of 3. Right, so now you'll know that these are questions of type multiple choice, and you can, if you want to, you can you can have a look to see. I think I'm going to have to document this a little bit more, but for now maybe just use MCQs. But you can have lots of different types of question in there, and each of those will have a different question type ID. So now let's get the answer from that. So we know that. So we're just going to put an if statement. If q type, q type ID equals 3. So this is where you might do your you might do some logic around what kind of question data element there is there. You're going to select different stuff based on this ID. So in this instance, because it's an ID 3, we're going to be looking for a node called question data MCQ. Okay, so we're going to say question data equals, and then we're going to look at Q, and we're going to look at question data MCQ, and we're doing that because this is a type 3 question, MCQ. And then in there we can grab the answer. So so we've got the question data now. So let's say the answer is going to be question data, and then we're going to grab the answer from that. So now we've gone into the question, and then into the question data MCQ, and then we're getting the answer. So we're going into the question, then the question data MCQ, and then the answer. And that will give us the answer for each of these questions as I run this now. Oh, hang on, I've got to print it, sorry. Print. Answer. Okay, so that'll just give us the answer for each of these questions, which is France, Germany, and the USA. Okay, so let's kind of formalize a little bit of the display here so that we can see a little bit more as we do this. So let's do print, and we're going to say question, and then I'm just going to do qtext here, and then we're going to say answer, and I'm just going to put the answer there, and then let's also just print a divider so we can see for certain where the where it is. Okay, right, run that, and now we're seeing question, where is Paris, answer France, question, where is Berlin, answer Germany. Okay, actually those aren't very pretty strings. Let's do format on them instead. If you're not familiar with this, all this is doing is swapping out this little bit where it's got the 0 in there. It's going to swap it out for whatever qtext is there, and I'm going to do the same here as well. Okay, and that hopefully will be slightly prettier. Yeah, oh, we're not getting the answer. I've got to put the 0 in there. Okay, there we go. Right, okay, so we've got question, where is Paris, answer France, and then let's now have a look at some of the incorrect answers as well. So we're going to get, let's make this a little bit tighter. So let's say incorrect answer 1 equals, and now we're going to get the incorrect answer. So we can use the same kind of query as we did there, but instead of looking for answer now, we're going to be looking for answer incorrect 1. Okay, I'm going to do that. And we can do that for 2 and 3 as well. So I'm just going to do answer. So now we've got the incorrect answer 1, incorrect answer 2, incorrect answer 3. And so now we can print this as well. Let's do incorrect answer 1. 2, 3, and then we're going to just be looking for incorrect answer 2 and 3. Okay, so hopefully you kept up with that. I was going a bit fast, but all we're doing now is saying look at the incorrect answer and grab the value for that and stick it into this variable incorrect answer 1, and do the same for number 2 and number 3. And if I run that now, you'll see that we've now got, it's a little bit more in here now. Might need to zoom out again now a bit more. There we are. Okay, so now we've got where is Paris, France, incorrect answer 1, Spain, incorrect answer 2, Germany, incorrect answer 3, Italy. Okay, so that's kind of cool, and you can do anything that you want with those. For example, you could, it's up to you what you do with them. You can do anything you want, but that's how you extract the data from the API request, or a way of extracting the data from the API request. I'm going to leave it there before it gets too complicated, but hopefully that is a good introduction to how it all works. And as I say, these principles for data extraction from the API will extend to all the different endpoints that we expose, and you know, it's up to you guys what you do with them. Hopefully that's useful, and thank you very much. Oh, one last thing as well, you're not to use these for commercial reasons. This is just for project coding reasons and learning. Thank you very much, and I hope that's useful.